I'm hosting my book club tonight, and I'm making pretty much every snack from scratch. So join me today while we make crackers, cake, focaccia, dips, and more. I'm Kara, by the way, and I'm a home cook. So I have been hosting my book club for, oh my God, this is so crazy, but almost 9 years now. I have always hosted it at my apartment on the first Thursday of the month. I pick the book every month. I usually choose the hot literary fiction of the moment, and I've been vetting the book by reading it first. And in February, we read Grand Rapids by Natasha Stagg. So typically I ask for 2 volunteers to bring a few bottles of wine or snacks, but today I decided to make the snacks myself. So the first thing I'm doing today is baking a cake. This is the crushed blackberry cornmeal cake from Alison Roman's cookbook, Nothing Fancy. I have been making this cake for years. It's not super sweet, which I like, and it's full of fruit. I'm going to make it today, though, with the last of those frostbitten frozen blueberries that we used a few videos ago in those gluten-free sunflower muffins. I've made this cake with blackberries many times as well, and I think you can also make it with raspberries. So the last time I used these blueberries, I was able to pop off the ice off the individual blueberries, but this recipe called for 2 pints or 4 cups of blueberries, and my hands were starting to get super cold. So I decided to abandon that avenue and I rinsed off the ice under the faucet. I didn't need to use super hot water. Room temperature water worked perfectly fine. I didn't want the blueberries, though, to be totally thawed because that would impact the cake. So I added the sugar to them, just a couple tablespoons, crushed them up a little bit, and then I put them back in the freezer while I pulled together the rest of the cake batter. I buttered the pan and then I whisked together the dry ingredients, which includes cornmeal. This is sort of like a sweet, fruity cornbread, and I love cornbread, so that's probably why I love this recipe so much. Part of the reason I wanted to make this recipe too was that I have some buttermilk that I used in that coffee cake that we made last video, and I'm trying to get through the jug before it goes bad. So I whisked the eggs and the buttermilk, and then I combined them with the dry ingredients and added the eggs and the oil. I used grapeseed oil here instead of canola. So I folded in those blueberries and then I popped it into the oven. It turned out great as usual. Before I started the cake, I pulled out focaccia dough that I had made the night before. This is my favorite focaccia recipe. It's from jeanne-mcdowell's book, Savory Baking. It's super simple, foolproof in my opinion. It uses bread flour, instant yeast, water, honey, olive oil, and salt. It's really easy to pull together. It only requires 1 set of stretches and folds, and then most of the work happens in the refrigerator overnight while it rises. So I'm going to pull it out and have it rise to room temperature. The recipe calls for 30 minutes to do that, but I think it needs longer. I usually go for about an hour. I've also made this recipe by replacing the water with yogurt whey. So if you make your own yogurt, this is a great place to use that. I've also replaced the honey with maple syrup too, and that worked out great. Realized I was out of olive oil in our cruet, so let's replace that from this bigger jug. I did something I've never done before, and it's overfill this container, but I was able to pour it directly into the 9x13 cake pan that I'm going to bake the focaccia in. So I gently flip the dough over so there's oil on both sides of the dough, and now I'm going to cover the pan and let it double in size. This is another place that I depart from the recipe. It usually needs about 2 hours to get to the size that I'm looking for. It's also winter, so my kitchen is colder than normal. One thing I really like about this recipe too is that she has a chart for the ingredients, so you can pick the size of your pan and go from there, which is really helpful if you want to size up or size down this recipe depending on the size of pan that you have in your kitchen. So once the dough is nice and fluffy, I'm going to stipple it with my fingers, add some more olive oil to the top, preheat the oven, and bake it. Once it is out of the oven, I let it cool for a couple minutes and then I move it to a rack. This is what helps keep it a little crispier on the outside because the steam from the hot pan isn't going to make it a little bit soggy. So I love this focaccia. I served it, of course, for book club, but it also makes a really great like Texas style toast and really good croutons. Okay, let's get some fruits and veggies into this snack spread. These are some carrots that I picked up from Mitch's Provisions, which is an awesome little market in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, with almost entirely local food products. I was sure to choose both purple and orange carrots because I knew I could use them together to create some visual contrast in the arrangement. So I decided to peel those, again, using this awesome new veggie peeler from Milk Street. I am going to cut them into smaller pieces and then put them away in the fridge until book club. It is February, so there is not a lot of local fruit in season. Apples, of course, in the Northeast, but they don't age well at room temperature. So I picked up some mandarin oranges also from Mitch's Provisions, and I'm going to go ahead and peel those so it's easier for guests to snack on. These are a little pithier than I hoped for, but that's just fine. The bowl here I'm using actually as a compost bowl was handmade by one of the husbands of one of my book club members, actually. So I bought this from him a couple of years ago. It is just so gorgeous. All right, let's get some dips going for those carrots and crackers. I have a container of this local sour cream from Ronnybrook. I got this from Farm to People. I am going to use half of it for an everything bagel seasoning dip and the other half for a harissa dip. I am going to keep this dip so simple. I'm just mixing some of that everything basil seasoning we made together a few videos ago. I'll add a link here in the video. I just season this to taste. I realized that I wanted it to be saltier, but since the salt in the bagel seasoning is a flaky salt, I thought it would be easier to manage that with a finer sea salt. So here I am using Redmond Real. I'm going to pack that back up and then I'm going to move on to the harissa dip. I made this dip a couple of weeks ago. It is from Alison Roman's new cookbook, Something from Nothing. The recipe calls for labne, which is just strained yogurt. Sour cream is not all that different from yogurt or labne, so I'm confident that it's going to be great here. I have this rose in cardamom harissa from Burlap and Barrel that I need to use up, so I'm going to sort of caramelize the harissa in a cast iron, and then I'm going to season the sour cream with lemon juice and salt, and then add the harissa to the top and drizzle some olive oil over it. It's just a really nice juxtaposition of flavors, and it's so instant to pull together. Last cooking project of the snack spread is some sourdough discard crackers. I am trying a new recipe. This is from the Seasonal Homestead. They are also on YouTube. I'll leave a link to their video and to the recipe in the description. So I had fed my sourdough starter earlier in the day. It's about 6 hours old, so it's not quite, a week old discard. I was intrigued by this recipe because Becky mentioned that she uses baking soda to minimize the sourdough flavor, which I thought was really interesting. I like the sourdough flavor a lot, but I do find it sort of overwhelming in discard recipes when there isn't more flour. So this recipe calls for discard baking soda, cornmeal, flax seeds, sugar, and sesame seeds. I really liked the sugar in this recipe. It's not a lot, it's just 1 teaspoon, but it makes them taste more like a store-bought cracker. One thing I might do differently next time is use a fine salt in the cracker batter because I thought the flaky sea salt on top was just not enough or not as consistent. I am going to tweak this a little bit more to my taste, but this is a great sourdough discard cracker recipe. I really like the thickness I was able to achieve, and I did use the recommended water in the recipe because my sourdough starter was rather fresh and therefore thicker. I spread the batter across a piece of parchment paper using an offset spatula, and that helped a lot. About 10 minutes in, I pulled it out and scored the crackers, so that made it really easy to break into cracker pieces once totally baked. I did have to bake it quite a bit longer than the recipe called for, but that might have just been my crunchiness preference. All right, here is everything that we made for book club. We have that everything bagel seasoning dip. This focaccia, it turned out so good. Those peeled mandarins. Always have to have olives. These are from Mina. There is that crushed blueberry cornmeal cake. These are potato chips. They're made by North Fork. They were so good in the dips. There are those sourdough discard crackers. There is the harissa dip. We have got the carrots. And this is a local cheese. It is a Colby. Thank you so much for coming along with me today while I made snacks for book club. Had a great time, and I'll see you next time on Home Food TV.